The CIA spent decades trying to understand Kim Jong-un. They failed. Until they found someone from his own family who told them everything. What they discovered changed how we understand one of the most dangerous regimes on Earth. Before we begin, take a moment, like the video, and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. There's a defector living in Europe right now who knows more about the Kim family than almost anyone alive. Her name is Lee Namok. Well, that's not her real name. She's in hiding. She has to be. Because she didn't just work for the Kim regime. She was family, close family. And what she told Western intelligence agencies about the inner workings of North Korea's ruling dynasty is absolutely insane. But she's not the only one. Over the past 70 years, several people connected to the Kim bloodline have escaped North Korea. Some were family members, others were trusted insiders who spent years in the Kim family's inner circle. And each one of them gave the CIA and other intelligence agencies pieces of a puzzle that revealed something terrifying. The Kim family isn't just a dictatorship, it's a cult. A carefully constructed system of control that's been perfected over 3 generations. And understanding how it works is the key to understanding why North Korea is the way it is today. This is the story of what the CIA learned from Kim Jong-un's own bloodline. It's a story about power, paranoia, betrayal, and survival. And it all starts with the first Kim, the grandfather, Kim Il-sung. Here's the thing about North Korea. It's the most secretive country on Earth, literally. There are entire government agencies in the United States whose only job is to try to figure out what's happening inside North Korea. And they struggle. Because North Korea doesn't let information out. They control everything. The media, the internet, travel, communication, everything. So how do you understand a country that doesn't want to be understood? How do you predict what a leader will do when you can't even get basic information about him?
This was the CIA's problem, and it's been their problem since North Korea was founded in 1948. They tried everything: satellite imagery, signal intelligence, spies, defectors, but it was never enough. Because the Kim regime is built on layers and layers of secrecy, and the closer you get to the top, the harder it is to penetrate. Until people from the inner circle started escaping. The first major defector from the Kim family circle was in the 1990s, then another in the 2000s, then more. And each time someone from the inside escaped and talked, the CIA learned something new, something crucial. They learned about Kim Jong-il's personality, his fears, his obsessions. They learned about how decisions were made, who had power, who didn't. They learned about the family dynamics, the rivalries, the purges, and most importantly, they learned about this system, the ideology, the indoctrination, the control mechanisms that kept 25 million people trapped in one of the most brutal dictatorships in modern history. But understanding the Kim family wasn't easy, because these weren't normal defectors. These were people who had everything: wealth, power, privilege, and they gave it all up to escape. Which meant they had seen something so terrible that they were willing to risk their lives and the lives of their families to get out. So what did they see? What did they tell the CIA? And how did it change our understanding of North Korea? Let's start at the beginning, with Kim Il-sung, the founder, the eternal president, the man who created this entire system. Kim Il-sung wasn't just a dictator, he was a god, or at least that's what North Koreans were taught to believe. The official story goes like this. Kim Il-sung was a brilliant guerrilla fighter who led the resistance against Japanese occupation. He was fearless, strategic, a natural leader. And when Korea was liberated in 1945, he was the obvious choice to lead the new North Korean state. That's the propaganda version. The reality is much more complicated.
Kim Il-sung did fight against the Japanese. That part is true. But his role was much smaller than the official history suggests.
He led a small group of guerrillas in Manchuria. They carried out raids, ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, but they weren't a major force. And Kim Il-sung wasn't the legendary hero the propaganda made him out to be. What he was, though, was smart and ambitious and really good at playing political games. When World War II ended and the Soviet Union occupied Northern Korea, they needed someone to lead the new communist government. They wanted someone they could control, someone loyal to Moscow, someone who wouldn't challenge Soviet authority. Kim Il-sung was perfect. He was young, he had some military credentials, and he was willing to do whatever the Soviets wanted. So they installed him as the leader of North Korea. And that's where his real genius showed itself. Because Kim Il-sung didn't just want to be a Soviet puppet. He wanted real power, total power. And over the next decade, he systematically eliminated everyone who could challenge him. Political rivals, military leaders, anyone with independent power. He purged them, executed them, sent them to prison camps. By the late 1950s, Kim Il-sung had total control. And that's when he started building the cult. Now this is where the defector's information becomes crucial, because the CIA didn't fully understand the cult of personality until people from the inside started talking. One of the first major sources was Hwang Jong-il. He wasn't family, but he was close, really close. He was one of the architects of Juche, the official ideology of North Korea. He worked directly with Kim Il-sung. He knew how the system worked from the inside. When Hwang defected in 1997, he told the CIA something they hadn't fully grasped before. The Kim cult wasn't just propaganda. It was a complete replacement of reality. North Koreans weren't just told that Kim Il-sung was a great leader. They were told he was superhuman, that he could control the weather, that birds sang in Korean when he was born, that he won battles single-handedly against thousands of Japanese soldiers. And these weren't just stories. They were taught in schools, tested on exams, repeated in every newspaper, every TV broadcast, every public speech. If you questioned them, you disappeared. Hwang explained that the entire education system was designed to indoctrinate people from birth. Children learned to worship Kim Il-sung before they learned to read. They sang songs about him, drew pictures of him, bowed to his statue every single day. And it wasn't optional. There were informants everywhere. Your neighbor could report you, your coworker, your own children. If you showed even a hint of disloyalty, you'd be arrested. And not just you, your entire family, 3 generations. This is what the CIA learned, that North Korea wasn't just a dictatorship. It was a totalitarian state on a level that even Stalin and Mao hadn't achieved. Because Kim Il-sung had created a system where loyalty wasn't enforced by fear alone. It was embedded in the culture, in the language, in the very way people thought. And when Kim Il-sung died in 1994, that system didn't collapse. It transferred to his son, Kim Jong-il. Kim Jong-il was a different kind of leader. Where his father was a military man, Kim Jong-il was an artist, a film buff. He loved movies, music, art. He was obsessed with cinema, particularly Hollywood films, even though they were banned in North Korea. But don't mistake his artistic interests for weakness. Kim Jong-il was just as ruthless as his father. Maybe more so. The CIA learned a lot about Kim Jong-il from defectors, but the most valuable information came from people who worked in his inner circle, people who saw him up close, who understood his personality, his quirks, his paranoia. One of these sources was Kenji Fujimoto. Now, Fujimoto wasn't Korean, he was Japanese. He was Kim Jong-il's personal sushi chef. For 13 years, he cooked for the Kim family. He traveled with them, ate with them, saw them in private moments when they weren't performing for the cameras. When Fujimoto escaped in 2001, he wrote a book about his experiences, and the CIA paid attention. because what he described was fascinating.
Kim Jong-il was a control freak. He micromanaged everything: what movies were made, what songs were performed, what buildings were constructed. He personally approved the design of every monument in Pyongyang. But he was also deeply paranoid. He was terrified of being poisoned. All his food had to be tested. He had food flown in from all over the world: Danish butter, Thai rice, Czech beer, Uzbek caviar, Japanese sushi, obviously. He was afraid of flying, so he traveled everywhere by armored train. These trips could take days. He'd have entire banquets prepared on the train. He'd watch movies, drink expensive cognac, and plan. Fujimoto also revealed something else. Kim Jong-il had multiple families, multiple wives, mistresses, children scattered across different households, and they all competed for his attention, for his favor. This was important intelligence because it meant there was no clear succession plan. Kim Jong-il had 3 sons from 2 different women, and they all wanted power. The oldest son was Kim Jong-nam, the middle son was Kim Jong-chul, the youngest was Kim Jong-un. And this is where the family dynamics get really interesting, because the CIA didn't know which son would take over when Kim Jong-il died. They needed to understand each of them, their personalities, their capabilities, their ambitions. And the best source of that information came from defectors who knew the family personally. One of the most valuable defectors was Ko Yong-hui's sister. Ko Yong-hui was Kim Jong-il's favorite consort. She was the mother of Kim Jong-chul and Kim Jong-un. And her sister, who managed to escape to South Korea, told intelligence agencies everything she knew about the family. She described Ko Yong-hui as ambitious, manipulative. She wanted her sons to inherit power, and she worked hard to position them ahead of Kim Jong-nam, who was the oldest but was born to a different woman. The sister described how Ko Yong-hui would badmouth Kim Jong-nam to Kim Jong-il. She'd plant doubts about his loyalty, his capability, his character. And it worked. Kim Jong-nam fell out of favor. The final straw came in 2001 when he was caught trying to sneak into Japan using a fake passport. He said he just wanted to visit Tokyo Disneyland, but Kim Jong-il was furious. It was embarrassing. It made the family look foolish. After that, Kim Jong-nam was essentially exiled. He lived in Macau and China. He still got money from the regime, but he had no political future. That left Kim Jong-chul and Kim Jong-un. And according to the defectors, Kim Jong-il thought Kim Jong-chul was too soft, too feminine, not strong enough to lead. Kim Jong-un, on the other hand, reminded Kim Jong-il of himself. He was ruthless, ambitious, willing to do whatever it took to get power. Fujimoto, the sushi chef, actually confirmed this. He said that Kim Jong-il once told him that Kim Jong-un had the personality of a leader, that he was the one. This intelligence was crucial, because when Kim Jong-il died in 2011, the CIA already knew that Kim Jong-un would take over. They'd been preparing for it, studying him, trying to understand him. But understanding Kim Jong-un was difficult because he'd been hidden from the world. He'd been educated in Switzerland under a fake name. He'd lived a privileged life, but a secretive one. The CIA needed more information, and they got it from an unexpected source: Kim Jong-un's aunt, Kim Kyung-hui, and her husband, Jong Song-thaek. Kim Kyung-hui was Kim Jong-il's sister. She was one of the most powerful people in North Korea. She had a military rank. She sat on important committees. She had real influence. Her husband, Jong Song-thaek, was even more powerful. He was Kim Jong-il's right-hand man. He managed the economy. He handled relations with China. He was supposed to be Kim Jong-un's mentor when the young leader took power. But here's the thing. Jong Song-thaek was ambitious. Too ambitious. According to multiple defector sources, Jong thought he could control Kim Jong-un. He thought the young, inexperienced leader would need guidance, that he could be the power behind the throne. He was wrong. Kim Jong-un saw Jong as a threat. And in 2013, just 2 years after taking power, Kim Jong-un had his uncle arrested. The charges were ridiculous: corruption, womanizing, drug use, factionalism, attempting to overthrow the government. It was a show trial. Everyone knew it. And then Jang Song-thaek was executed. Some reports say he was shot.
Others say he was fed to dogs. The truth is unclear, but the message was crystal clear. Kim Jong-un was in charge, and anyone who challenged him, even family, would be eliminated. Kim Kyung-hee, Jang's wife and Kim Jong-un's aunt, disappeared from public view. For years, nobody knew if she was alive or dead. Some defectors said she'd been killed. Others said she was in hiding. It wasn't until 2020 that she reappeared at a public event, looking much older and frail. The CIA learned something important from this. Kim Jong-un was different from his father and grandfather. He was more brutal, more willing to use violence, more paranoid. And that paranoia extended to his own family. Kim Jong-nam, the exiled half-brother, probably thought he was safe. He'd stayed out of politics. He lived quietly in Macau. He didn't challenge Kim Jong-un's authority. He just wanted to live his life. But Kim Jong-un saw him as a threat anyway, because as long as Kim Jong-nam was alive, he was a potential rival, a potential replacement if something went wrong. So in 2017, Kim Jong-un had him killed. The assassination happened in Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. Two women approached Kim Jong-nam. They wiped something on his face. He thought it was a prank, some kind of joke for a TV show. It wasn't. It was VX nerve agent, one of the most deadly chemical weapons ever created. Kim Jong-nam died within 20 minutes. The two women claimed they thought they were participating in a reality show prank, but intelligence agencies knew better. This was a North Korean hit, planned and executed by regime agents. The CIA and other intelligence agencies studied this assassination carefully because it revealed something about Kim Jong-un's mindset. He was willing to use banned chemical weapons in a foreign country. He was willing to risk international outrage. He was willing to kill his own brother just to eliminate a potential threat. This wasn't rational behavior. This was paranoia on an extreme level. And defectors who knew the family confirmed it. They said Kim Jong-un trusted no one, that he saw threats everywhere, that he believed everyone was plotting against him. One defector who'd worked in the regime's security services said that Kim Jong-un had increased the number of executions dramatically compared to his father, that he'd purged hundreds of officials, that entire families had been sent to prison camps for minor infractions. Another defector described how Kim Jong-un had executed his own deputy prime minister for falling asleep during a meeting, shot by firing squad for dozing off. These stories painted a picture of a leader who ruled by terror, who used fear to maintain control, who believed that showing any weakness would be fatal. And the CIA realized something. This made Kim Jong-un dangerous, because a paranoid leader with nuclear weapons is the worst possible combination. Let's talk about the nuclear program, because this is where the family dynamics and the regime's survival instincts intersect. Kim Il-sung started the nuclear program back in the 1950s, but it was slow, limited. North Korea didn't have the technology or the resources to build actual weapons. Kim Jong-il accelerated it. He saw what happened to Saddam Hussein in Iraq, to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, leaders who gave up their weapons programs and then got overthrown. Kim Jong-il decided that nuclear weapons were the only guarantee of survival. And he was right from his perspective. But it was Kim Jong-un who turned the program into an obsession. According to defectors from the nuclear program, Kim Jong-un personally oversaw weapons development. He attended tests. He reviewed designs. He pushed scientists to work faster, to test more frequently. Between 2011 and 2017, North Korea conducted 4 nuclear tests. They tested missiles constantly. They developed ICBMs that could theoretically reach the United States. And the whole time, the CIA was trying to understand why. Why was Kim Jong-un moving so fast? Why was he risking sanctions, isolation, potential military strikes? The answer came from defectors who understood the family's mindset. They explained that Kim Jong-un believed the nuclear program was the only thing keeping him alive, that without it, he'd end up like Gaddafi, dragged through the streets and killed by his own people. One high-ranking defector who'd attended military meetings said that Kim Jong-un was obsessed with Gaddafi's death, that he'd watched the videos over and over, that he was determined never to let that happen to him. So the nuclear program wasn't just about defending against external threats. It was about ensuring the Kim family's survival, about making sure that no country, not the United States, not China, not anyone, could force regime change. This was a crucial insight because it meant that Kim Jong-un would never voluntarily give up his nuclear weapons, no matter what incentives were offered, no matter what deals were proposed. The weapons were his insurance policy, and he'd rather die than give them up. Now, let's go back in time a bit, because one of the most interesting sources of intelligence on Kim Jong-un came from people who knew him when he was young, when he was just a kid being educated in Switzerland. The CIA tracked down people who went to school with him, classmates, teachers, people who saw him before he became the supreme leader, and what they described was fascinating. Kim Jong-un attended school in Switzerland under the name Pak-un. He lived with an aunt who pretended to be his mother. He tried to blend in as a normal kid. His classmates remembered him as quiet, a bit awkward. He loved basketball. He was obsessed with the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan was his hero. He wasn't a great student. He struggled with languages. But he was competitive. He hated losing. Whether it was basketball or video games, he always wanted to win. One classmate described how Kim Jong-un would get angry if he lost at video games, how he'd sometimes break the controller, how he couldn't handle being beaten. This might seem like trivial information, just childhood behavior, but to intelligence analysts, it was valuable, because it revealed personality traits, traits that would shape how he'd lead. The competitiveness, the hatred of losing, the inability to accept defeat. These weren't just childhood quirks, they were core parts of his personality. And when you combine that with the paranoia he inherited from his family, with the brutal political culture of North Korea, you get a very dangerous leader. The CIA also learned about Kim Jong-un's exposure to Western culture during those years. He lived in a democratic country. He saw freedom. He experienced life outside the North Korean bubble. Some analysts thought this might make him more open to reform, that seeing how the rest of the world lived might make him want to change North Korea. But defectors who knew the family said no. They said Kim Jong-un's time in Switzerland didn't make him appreciate freedom. It made him resentful, because he saw all the things North Koreans didn't have. And instead of wanting to give those things to his people, he wanted to prove that the North Korean system was superior. It was cognitive dissonance. He knew North Korea was poor, backwards, isolated, but he couldn't admit that the system was wrong, because admitting that would mean questioning everything his family had built. So instead, he doubled down. He became even more committed to the regime, even more determined to prove that North Korea could compete with the West. When Kim Jong-un took power in 2011, he was only 27 years old. He was young, inexperienced, and there were plenty of older, more experienced officials who thought they could control him. They learned very quickly that they were wrong.
Within the first year, Kim Jong-un began purging officials, anyone he suspected of disloyalty, anyone who'd been too close to his father, anyone who might pose a threat. The first major purge was the military. North Korea's military had been incredibly powerful under Kim Jong-il. The military-first policy had given generals enormous influence. Kim Jong-un saw this as a problem. He didn't want the military to have independent power. He wanted total control. So he started replacing generals. Some were demoted, others were executed, and the positions were filled with younger officers,
people who owed their positions to Kim Jong-un, people who'd be loyal to him, not to the institution. Defectors from the military described this period as terrifying. Nobody knew who would be purged next. Generals who'd served for decades were suddenly arrested on trumped-up charges. Some disappeared, others were publicly executed. One defector described attending a public execution of a general who'd been accused of plotting against Kim Jong-un. The charges were absurd, but that didn't matter. The execution wasn't about justice. It was about sending a message. The message was clear. Kim Jong-un was in charge, and disloyalty, even perceived disloyalty, was a death sentence. But it wasn't just the military. Kim Jong-un purged the party too, and the bureaucracy, and the security services. One estimate from defectors suggested that Kim Jong-un had over 300 officials executed in his first 5 years. That's an average of 1 execution every 6 days. The CIA paid close attention to these purges because they revealed how Kim Jong-un consolidated power, and they revealed his paranoia. Every purge created more paranoia, because every time Kim Jong-un killed someone, he created enemies. Family members of the purged, friends, colleagues, people who might seek revenge. So Kim Jong-un had to keep purging. He had to keep eliminating potential threats. It was a vicious cycle, and it made him more isolated, more paranoid, more dangerous. One of the most horrific things the CIA learned from defectors was about the prison camp system, the Kwanliso, the gulags of North Korea. These aren't normal prisons. They're concentration camps, places where entire families are sent for political crimes, where people are worked to death, starved, tortured. There are an estimated 120,000 people in these camps right now, maybe more. Nobody knows for sure because North Korea doesn't acknowledge they exist. But defectors who've escaped from these camps have told their stories, and what they describe is hell on earth. One defector named Shin Dong-hyuk was actually born in a prison camp. His parents were prisoners. He grew up behind barbed wire. He didn't know there was a world outside the camp until he was a teenager. He described watching his mother and brother being executed for trying to escape. He described being tortured for not reporting their escape plan. He described years of starvation, forced labor, and constant fear. Another defector, Kang Chol-hwan, spent 10 years in a camp. His entire family was imprisoned because his grandfather had fallen out of political favor. He described children dying from malnutrition, prisoners being beaten to death for stealing food, public executions for minor infractions. These testimonies gave the CIA a clear picture of just how brutal the North Korean system is. But they also revealed something about the Kim family's control mechanisms. The camps serve multiple purposes. They punish political enemies, they instill fear in the population, and they provide free labor for the regime's projects. But more than that, they demonstrate the 3 generations rule. If you're accused of a political crime in North Korea, your parents and your children are punished too. 3 generations of your family go to the camps. This ensures that nobody steps out of line, because even if you are willing to sacrifice yourself, are you willing to sacrifice your children, your parents? It's a system of collective punishment designed to prevent any form of dissent. And it works, because North Koreans live in constant fear that one wrong word, one wrong action could destroy their entire family. Kim Jong-un has maintained the system. He hasn't shut down the camps. He hasn't reformed them. In fact, defector reports suggest he's expanded them. This tells the CIA something important. Kim Jong-un isn't interested in reform. He's interested in control, and he'll use any means necessary to maintain that control. Another thing the CIA learned about from defectors is the Songbun system. This is North Korea's social classification system, and it's one of the most rigid caste systems in the modern world. Songbun divides North Koreans into 3 main classes: the core, the wavering, and the hostile. The core class are the loyal, people whose families supported Kim Il-sung during the revolution, people with revolutionary credentials. They get the best jobs, the best housing, access to universities, political positions. The wavering class are the neutral, people whose families didn't fight for the revolution but didn't fight against it either. They get okay jobs, they can live in cities, but they'll never hold important positions. The hostile class are the enemies, people whose families were landlords or collaborated with the Japanese or fought on the wrong side of the Korean War. They're stuck in the worst jobs, they live in rural areas, they can't get into universities. Their children inherit their low status. And here's the key thing. Your songbun is determined by your family history. You inherit it, and you can't change it. Well, you can, but only in one direction, down. If you or your family do something wrong, your songbun can drop, but it almost never goes up. Defectors explained to the CIA that songbun determines everything in North Korea: where you live, what you eat, what schools your children attend, whether you can join the military, whether you can live in Pyongyang. This system serves the regime in several ways. It creates a privileged class that benefits from the status quo. These people have a stake in keeping the Kim family in power, because if the regime falls, they lose their privileges.
It also creates a permanent underclass, people who have no hope of improving their situation, people who are treated as second-class citizens their entire lives. And it prevents social mobility, which prevents the emergence of alternative power centers. Because if you can't rise through merit, you can't accumulate independent power. Kim Jong-un has maintained the songbun system. He uses it just like his father and grandfather did, because it's an effective tool of social control. And defectors told the CIA something else. Kim Jong-un has actually weaponized songbun. He's used it to punish entire families of people he's purged. Their songbun drops. Their children lose opportunities. They become untouchables. It's a way of extending punishment beyond the individual, of making examples, of showing what happens when you cross the supreme leader. Despite the propaganda, despite the claims of self-reliance and socialist paradise, North Korea's economy is a disaster. And defectors have given the CIA detailed information about just how bad it really is. The official economy barely functions. State-run factories often don't have electricity or raw materials. Workers show up but don't actually work because there's nothing to do. But there's also an unofficial economy, black markets, informal trading, bribes, and corruption. Defectors described how ordinary North Koreans survive by trading in these markets, selling goods smuggled from China, growing vegetables in private plots and selling them illegally, bribing officials to look the other way. The regime tolerates these markets because they have to, because without them, people would starve. The state can't provide for the population anymore. But Kim Jong-un has also tried to crack down on the markets periodically, because they represent something dangerous: economic independence. When people can make money without relying on the state, they become harder to control. They have resources, options. They don't have to completely depend on government rations. This scares the regime, because economic independence leads to political independence. It creates people who might question the system. Defectors told the CIA about these crackdowns, how market vendors would be arrested, how goods would be confiscated, how people would be sent to labor camps for capitalist activities. But the markets always came back because people needed them to survive. This revealed something important to the CIA. The Kim regime's control isn't absolute. There are cracks in the system, places where people are finding ways to live outside the official ideology. And these cracks are growing because more and more North Koreans are accessing outside information. This might be the most important thing defectors have told the CIA. North Korea is losing the information war. For decades, the Kim regime had total control over information. No outside media, no internet, no communication with the outside world. North Koreans only knew what the regime wanted them to know. But that's changing. USB drives smuggled from China contain South Korean dramas, Hollywood movies, K-pop music, and North Koreans are watching them. It's incredibly risky. If you're caught with foreign media, you can be executed.
But people are doing it anyway. Defectors described secret viewing parties, where trusted friends would gather in a house, cover the windows, and watch South Korean TV shows on hidden devices. And these shows are eye-opening because they show South Korea as wealthy, modern, free, the complete opposite of what North Korean propaganda claims. North Koreans are told that South Korea is a poverty-stricken hellhole occupied by American imperialists. But the TV shows show expensive cars, beautiful apartments, people traveling freely, speaking their minds.
This creates cognitive dissonance, and it makes people question what else the regime has lied about. One defector told the CIA that watching South Korean dramas was what made her decide to escape, because she realized everything she'd been taught was a lie, and she wanted to see the real world for herself. This is why Kim Jong-un is terrified of information. He's increased punishments for possessing foreign media. He's created special police units to hunt down USB drives. He's executed people for distributing South Korean content. But he can't stop it. The border with China is too porous. Too many people are smuggling drives across. Too many North Koreans are curious about the outside world. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. The CIA believes this is the regime's greatest vulnerability. Not military pressure, not sanctions, but information. Truth, because the Kim regime is built on lies, and when people stop believing the lies, the whole system could collapse. Here's something else defectors revealed to the CIA. North Korea's relationship with China is complicated, really complicated. Officially, China is North Korea's ally. They fought together in the Korean War. China provides aid, trade, diplomatic support. But privately, the relationship is tense. Defectors who worked in the foreign ministry described how North Korean officials resent China. They see China as condescending, treating North Korea like a little brother who needs guidance. And they're not wrong. China does treat North Korea that way, because from China's perspective, North Korea is a buffer state, a strategic asset that keeps American troops away from the Chinese border. But China doesn't actually like the Kim regime. They find Kim Jong-un unpredictable, reckless. His nuclear tests and missile launches create problems for China's international reputation. Defectors said that Chinese officials have repeatedly urged North Korea to reform, to open up economically like China did, to become less confrontational with the West. But Kim Jong-un refuses, because he's seen what happened to communist parties that reformed. The Soviet Union collapsed. Eastern Europe abandoned communism. China still has the Communist Party, but it's communist in name only. Kim Jong-un doesn't want to risk that. He doesn't want to open up North Korea and potentially lose control. So the relationship with China is transactional. North Korea needs China for survival. China needs North Korea for strategic purposes. But there's no real trust. And this creates opportunities for the West. Because China's patience with North Korea isn't infinite. If Kim Jong-un pushes too far, if he creates too many problems, China might reduce its support. The CIA watches this relationship carefully because any crack between North Korea and China could be exploited. Here's something that keeps CIA analysts up at night. What happens when Kim Jong-un dies? He's in his late 30s now. He's overweight. He smokes heavily. There are reports of health problems, heart issues, diabetes. He disappeared from public view for several weeks in 2020, sparking rumors he was seriously ill or even dead. So succession planning is a real concern. And defectors have given the CIA some insights into who might take over. Kim Jong-un has 3 children with his wife, Ri Sol-ju, 2 daughters and a son. But they're all very young, too young to rule. There's also Kim Jong-un's sister, Kim Yo-jong. She's emerged as a powerful figure in the regime. She handles propaganda, diplomacy. She's been given significant responsibilities. Some defectors think she could take over if Kim Jong-un dies. She's ruthless, capable, and she has the Kim bloodline. But other defectors say no. North Korea is too patriarchal, too traditional. They'll never accept a woman as supreme leader. So there might be a power struggle, different factions competing for control. The military, the party, the security services. And a power struggle in a nuclear-armed country is terrifying.
The CIA has tried to game out different scenarios. If Kim Jong-un dies suddenly, what happens? Does the regime collapse? Does someone take over smoothly? Does civil war break out? Nobody knows, because the succession planning in North Korea is secret. Even high-ranking defectors don't have complete information. But one thing is clear. The Kim dynasty has ruled for 3 generations, and maintaining that rule required constant purges, executions, and paranoia. If the dynasty ends, if there's no clear Kim family successor, the whole system could collapse, because the regime's legitimacy is built entirely on the Kim family bloodline. And that would create chaos. Millions of refugees flooding into China and South Korea, potential nuclear weapons falling into unknown hands, a humanitarian catastrophe. This is why the CIA takes the succession question so seriously, because the stability of Northeast Asia might depend on it. Let's talk about reunification, because this is something defectors bring up a lot, the dream of a unified Korea. For South Koreans, especially older generations, reunification is an emotional issue. These are people who have family in the North, parents, siblings, children they haven't seen in 70 years. But for North Korean defectors, reunification is complicated. On one hand, they want it. They want their families to be free. They want the regime to end. They want North Koreans to experience the same freedoms they now enjoy in the South. But on the other hand, they're realistic about how hard it would be. Germany reunified in 1990, and it was expensive, difficult. East Germany was more developed than North Korea is now, and it still took decades and trillions of dollars to integrate the two countries. North Korea is much poorer than East Germany was. The education gap is bigger, the psychological damage is deeper, the indoctrination is more severe. Defectors told the CIA that reunifying Korea might be the work of generations, not years, generations. Because you can't just open the border and expect everything to work. You'd have 25 million people who've lived under totalitarian rule their entire lives, who've been taught to worship the Kim family, who don't know how to function in a free society.
There would be massive unemployment, because North Korean workers don't have the skills South Korean employers need. There would be culture shock. North and South Korea have been separated for 70 years. They've evolved differently. The languages have even diverged. There are words South Koreans use that North Koreans don't understand, and vice versa. There would be resentment. Some South Koreans already resent defectors. They see them as a burden, as people who need government support and take resources. Now imagine that resentment multiplied by millions. It could create serious social tensions. And then there's the question of what to do with the people who worked for the regime. The prison camp guards, the secret police, the party officials. Do you prosecute them? Put them on trial for crimes against humanity? Or do you try some kind of reconciliation process, like South Africa did after apartheid? These are questions without easy answers. And defectors told the CIA that reunification, if it happens, will be messy, painful, difficult. But they still hope for it, because the alternative, leaving North Korea as it is, means condemning another generation to lives of suffering. So after decades of gathering intelligence from defectors, after piecing together all these fragments of information, what did the CIA really learn? They learned that the Kim regime isn't like other dictatorships. It's not just about power. It's not just about economics. It's not just about security. It's a system built on total control. Control of information, control of movement, control of thought, control of reality itself. The Kim family created a world where they are gods, where questioning them is literally unthinkable for most people, where even recognizing the possibility of an alternative is dangerous. And they've sustained this system for 3 generations through a combination of brutal violence, sophisticated propaganda, and carefully designed social structures. The CIA also learned that this system is fragile. It looks strong from the outside,
But inside, it's held together by fear, and fear is brittle. Every purge creates more potential enemies. Every execution creates families who might seek revenge. Every lie creates the possibility of someone discovering the truth. The regime knows this. That's why they're so paranoid. That's why they react so violently to any perceived threat. That's why they'll never voluntarily give up power, because they know that if the system collapses, they're done. There's no soft landing for the Kim family, no comfortable retirement, no amnesty deal. They'll end up like Ceausescu in Romania, tried and executed, or like Gaddafi in Libya, killed by their own people. So they'll fight to the death to maintain control, and that makes them incredibly dangerous. Because a regime that sees any change as an existential threat is a regime that can't be reasoned with, can't be negotiated with, can't be trusted. And when that regime has nuclear weapons, the stakes couldn't be higher. This is what the CIA learned from Kim Jong-un's own bloodline, that the Kim regime is built on a foundation of lies, violence, and fear, that it cannot reform without collapsing, that it will do anything, absolutely anything, to survive. And understanding that is the key to dealing with North Korea. The defectors from Kim Jong-un's inner circle gave the CIA something invaluable. Not just intelligence, not just information, but understanding. They helped Western intelligence agencies see North Korea not as a mysterious black box, but as a system that operates according to certain rules, a system driven by paranoia, sustained by brutality, and increasingly vulnerable to the truth. Bobby Hall and David Heilemann, the helicopter pilots from our earlier example, got to leave North Korea after 13 days. But there are 25 million people who can't leave, who are trapped in a system designed to control every aspect of their lives. The defectors who escaped and shared their stories did so at enormous personal risk. They can never go home. Their families who remain in North Korea face punishment. They live in hiding, always looking over their shoulders.
But they spoke anyway, because they wanted the world to understand. They wanted people to know what the Kim regime really is. And thanks to them, the CIA and other intelligence agencies have a clearer picture. They understand the motivations, the fears, the internal dynamics, the weaknesses. This understanding shapes policy. It informs negotiations. It helps predict what Kim Jong-un might do next. But understanding isn't the same as solving. North Korea remains one of the most dangerous and unpredictable countries on Earth. The Kim regime continues to develop nuclear weapons, to threaten its neighbors, to oppress its people. And as long as the Kim family remains in power, that's unlikely to change. Because what the CIA learned from the defectors is that the Kim regime can't change. It's structurally incapable of reform. Opening up would mean losing control, and losing control would mean the end. So we're stuck in this strange stalemate, a nuclear-armed dictatorship that can't reform and can't be ignored. The defectors gave us understanding, but they couldn't give us solutions, because there might not be any easy solutions, not while the Kim family rules, not while 25 million people remain trapped in one of the most repressive systems ever created. All we can do is watch, wait, and hope that one day, through information, through internal pressure, through generational change, something shifts. That the cracks in the system grow wider, that more people learn the truth, that the fear that holds everything together finally breaks. It might take years, decades, generations. But the defectors who escaped, who risked everything to tell their stories, they believe it will happen eventually. Because no system built entirely on lies can last forever. The truth has a way of coming out. And when it does, when enough North Koreans see through the propaganda and understand that the Kim family aren't gods, but just men, everything could change very quickly.
That's the hope, anyway. That's what the defectors are fighting for. And that's what they've taught the CIA to watch for. Not military coups, not foreign invasions, but the slow erosion of the lies that hold the system together. Because in the end, you to know.